Hello, you're watching Around the World. French President Emmanuel Macron and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer are giving a joint press conference at the Élysée Palace now. The pair have been gathering dozens of countries this Friday with the aim of advancing the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Let's take a listen.
Depend on these routes, especially in Asia, and for the whole of the global economy, whether it be for the transport of gas, of fertilizers and other products. The current events and developments are encouraging, even though we have to be cautious. Of course, we commend the ceasefire between Iran and the United States. A ceasefire was also recently announced for Lebanon and Israel, which needs to be enforced and respected. And we have just heard the announcement by Iran that the Strait of Hormuz is reopened. So all of this goes in the right direction, although we note that the Iranian authorities have set a timetable for the opening up of the Hormuz Strait, and that America is still blocking Iranian ports and ships. But the initiative that we brought together today is all the more legitimate because it will consolidate these short-term announcements and it will give them the possibility to last in time. We are a group of independent countries that are outside the belligerent countries, and we ask for the full and immediate, unconditional reopening of the Strait of Hormuz by all parties. We call for the instauration of the conditions of free passage as they were before the war, and for the full compliance with the law of the sea. We oppose all regimes of convention that would aim to privatize the strait, and we are against all toll system. We will work with all the relevant parties in the shipping industry and insurance companies and so on in order to enforce this initiative, and we support the International Maritime Organization to help the seafarers who have been blocked at sea. We will work in coordination with the United Kingdom in order to set up a neutral mission that is separate from the warring parties in order to secure the merchant ships that will be transiting through the Gulf. Next week, a planning mission will take place in London, and this will be accompanied by diplomatic work and the de-escalation work with Iran, as well as coordination work with the United States and Israel. Different actors. We have already deployed various military initiatives in the region to protect our citizens and our interests. France has a solid naval units in the Mediterranean and the region, with Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier, as well as other airships. These ships will be used in the Red Sea and in the Mediterranean Sea, and part of these ships will also be affected to this initiative we just mentioned. We have a message of hope, a message of preparation, and a message of unity. Europe is working with countries from the Persian Gulf, from Asia, from the Pacific, from different regions. So the world was brought together with the same will, a coalition of independent countries who aim to enforce international law and the freedom of navigation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. We just had a very productive meeting, bringing together 49 countries around a very simple message and proposition that the world needs the Strait of Hormuz fully open, because that is how we keep prices down for our people and stop the global economic damage. So we've all agreed there was real unity in the meeting that we've just had. We want to see a return to talks and a lasting agreement, including the reopening of the Strait. We welcome the announcement that was made during our meeting, but we need to make sure that that is both lasting and a workable proposal. And if anything, it reinforces the need for the work that we've been doing this afternoon, because we're very clear that the mission that we're putting together is a defensive mission and that comes after a ceasefire. So that's why we brought the international group together to indicate how we will play our part. And there are a number of elements. First, to deliver the diplomatic push for peace based on the fundamental principle that the Strait should be reopened immediately with no tolls and no restrictions. And there was absolute unity on those points across all of the states attending today. And that transcends the other differences that countries who are with us this afternoon may have, because the whole world needs to see a solution here. Second, that we need to manage the economic shock by avoiding unnecessary trade restrictions, supporting energy and food security, and supporting industry so that shipping can resume as soon as conditions permit. Thirdly, and crucially, we agreed to accelerate our military planning. I can confirm that along with France, the UK will lead a multinational mission to protect freedom of navigation as soon as conditions allow. This will be strictly peaceful and defensive as a mission to reassure commercial shipping and support mine clearance. We invite all nations with an interest in the free flow of global trade to join us. Some have already indicated their readiness to contribute. We will take this forward with a military planning conference in London next week, where we will announce more detail on the composition of the mission, and over a dozen countries have already offered to contribute assets. But look, reopening the Strait is a global necessity and a global responsibility. We need to act to get global energy and trade flowing freely again to bring down prices for working people. Our citizens need to see a return to peace and stability, and we will play our full part. Thank you, Emmanuel.
Merci beaucoup, Keir. Madame la Présidente du Conseil, chère Georgia.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Buongiorno a tutti. Ovviamente grazie, Presidente Macron, al Primo Ministro Starmer per questa iniziativa che io considero estremamente importante.
Thank you, Mr. Macron. Thank you, Mr. Starmer, for this initiative, which is fundamental. And that is why I really wanted to be here in Paris. It is clear that the freedom of navigation in the Hormuz Strait is absolutely fundamental for our country, for Italy, for Europe, for the international community in its entirety. We need to reiterate a fundamental principle of international law, which applies to the Strait of Hormuz and for any other strait or passage on which the international supply chains depend. This is an area of a huge economic importance, because around 20% of the global liquid natural gas and petrol supply goes through the Hormuz Strait, as does fertilizer. So it is very important for countries around the world, and thinking about imports and exports from the Gulf countries, which are strategic partners of Italy. 60% of food products go through this strait to those countries. So we need to set up the right conditions so that this area can be stabilized, and we need to find a solution for the wars in the Middle East. We have seen in the last hours that the Strait of Hormuz has been reopened. This is something that is fundamental. Throughout the negotiations, we heard that ceasefire was declared in Lebanon. As ceasefire was also negotiated between the United States, Israel, and Iran. and an announcement as to the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz was made. This is essential for all negotiations that aim to put an end to the crisis in the Middle East. Of course, this is not the only topic. Iran abandoning nuclear ambitions is also fundamental, and there are also other elements that are important. But the main reason we are meeting today is because we understand the significance, the importance of this challenge. Of course, I would like to thank Emmanuel Macron, but I would also like to thank all the other countries that participated in this morning's meeting. It shows that the work that we are doing is shared. It is something for the common good, the common interest. But this is important from a security point of view, from a humanitarian point of view, from an economic point of view. You can see that countries and ships are directly impacted by this crisis, and Italy is ready to do its part. We will first focus on ships that are now located in the Strait of Hormuz. We need to make sure that the mines are cleared. When we need to reassure the Navy, the merchant shipping sector, and the ships that are on their way through the strait. Our initiative has a purely defensive nature, and we are carrying out important planning activities, and within this framework, Italy is ready to provide its naval vessels. Of course, once authorization is obtained from the Italian Parliament. But this is something that we have done in the past with other missions that Italy has carried out at sea. We have carried out missions at sea in areas that are not far from the Strait of Hormuz near Somalia, for example, which can also be a good example to follow. But today's initiative shows that Europe is ready to play its part together with all its partners. This initiative is also part of a much vaster effort, which shows that our countries are ready to meet the challenge of this cycle of crises that does not just impact the Middle East, but also Ukraine and other fronts. Italy will do everything possible to consolidate the ceasefire in Iran, which is precious, important, and was reached thanks to the negotiations between the USA and Iran. And it is important that these negotiations continue to put an end to the conflict in Iran. And thank you once again to Emmanuel Macron. Emmanuel Macron, Keir Starmer.
Friedrich, dear Emmanuel, Prime Minister Starmer, let me start by saying I'm very grateful that French President and the UK Prime Minister decided to convene this meeting today, and I'm pleased also that Giorgia Meloni for Italy and myself for the Republic have been able to be here. We had enormous agreement and consensus, both here in the room and those in the video conference. And I was actually quite surprised to see how complete the agreement was around the various tables. And that meant that we all stood behind the conclusions that came out of this meeting, because this war against Iran raises major challenges for all of us. We want the Near Middle East as soon as possible to return to peace and stability. It's in the interest of all of us. The skyrocketing energy prices have to be brought back downwards as soon as possible, and this war must not turn into a transatlantic stress test. Therefore, I think we can draw a number of conclusions with this together, because the challenges I've just mentioned hit us all, impact all of the EU countries and beyond. And if we don't succeed in the initiatives we've taken, then there's the threat of a multidimensional global war. And let me say here that I take very seriously what was said in Washington last year during the meetings of the IMF and the World Bank concerning developments on the capital markets, which means that it's in the immediate interest of all of us to increase our efforts and draw these conclusions, of which I think there are three. And as Germany, we support the ongoing efforts to achieve a quick diplomatic agreement between the United States and Iran. On our side, we are in contact with all the stakeholders for many, many months now. We have seen that Tehran has not ended, but we want to reach a conclusion as quickly as possible. And we agree with all our partners that Iran must terminate its nuclear program, must stop attacking Israel and the Gulf states, and it must ensure the opening of the strait in a way that is lasting, secure and toll-free. We got a good piece of news during our discussions today, but of course this has to be implemented in full observance with national law of the sea. There must be no restrictions. Merchant shipping and their crews have to have unrestricted passage through the strait. Secondly, we welcome the resumption of direct peace talks between Israel and Lebanon. This is a historical opportunity for these two companies, these two neighboring countries, to come together. Hezbollah must lay down its weapons and not attack Israel anymore. But Israel must also make an effort to ensure lasting peace. I recently spoke with Prime Minister Netanyahu. It was a telephone call, and I would like to thank the USA for their apparently successful efforts in ensuring a ceasefire. And thirdly, given the upcoming conference in London next year, we are willing to make a German contribution to ensuring freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. This could mean at the end of negotiations, perhaps a contribution by the German armed forces to an international mission, as long as we have a strong legal basis for this, for example, a UN Security Council resolution. And we also need approval of the German government and parliament and a viable military concept. This sort of participation could mean mine clearance, for example. That is something we're able to do, and therefore we will continue to take part in the ongoing future military planning talks. And if possible, we would like to ensure participation by the United States. We feel that would be desirable. And we would also like to have a UN Security Council resolution. So I think we are seeing progress. We want to make our contribution so that we can have very soon stable and lasting peace in the region. Thank you. Thank you all very much.